While we're speaking of Tesla, man, I tell you, and camping, and we'll just kind of roll right into this thing. You brought this to my attention. You were pretty excited about it.
I see what you did there. You said Tesla. You said
owners.
You said we'll roll right in. You see that? You see that?
I did.
Okay, sorry.
That was an unintentional segue in, but it did. I'm glad it worked. Glad you're wise on your fingers there, man, so you could get that sound effect with it. But at the end of the day, this is something that's hasn't been known. It's just something that really hasn't been tried in this manner to test it to see if it would actually work, and it does. And I'll touch on it and then let Keith really get into it and tell you why this is so important. Which is it's basically the regenerative braking, which is nothing new. Regenerative braking has been around for a couple hundred years at least, right? Or at least 150 years. That technology, yes. They use it on trains, trains and some subway lines, electric powered subways and stuff like that. I think the Tube in London uses some form of regenerative braking, which basically it will restore about 20% of power. It helps, that. So, Keith, why don't you tell our viewers how important this is to someone like yourself who's out on the highway in a motorhome with a tow behind?
Yeah.
So,
and some people like to call those dinghies or flat tows. Basically, the concept is you're towing the car 4 wheels rolling on the pavement instead of on a trailer. Right. I tow my FJ on a trailer because FJs can't. A lot of Toyotas don't like to be towed with the wheels turning. They just
plus
don't.
There's no other advantage you have by doing that over flat tow versus trailer towing.
I've driven Teslas. There's typically different levels of intensity that you can set on this, and they call it regenerative braking. The brakes on the vehicle actually have very little to do with the process.
Right, it's the motors themselves. So, yeah.
Now, if you turn that off, you'll coast just like a traditional, automobile internal combustion engine. But the higher you set that regenerative braking, you really almost never have to touch your brake pedal. You just let off the gas and the car starts to brake, and it's using those turning motors almost like generators to create electricity, right? So
that's right.
So for those of you that own motorhomes, and I'm one of you, a lot of people tow Jeeps. A Honda CR-V is a real popular one because they're super lightweight. And I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we see. Oh, hey, we got side shots here in the house. Yeah, that might work. Did you bring your headphones?
Well, one end plug into your computer.
Yeah, go get your headphones and come back. We might have a guest showing up in a few minutes, everybody.
This is a spontaneous in the moment.
You never know what's going to happen out here in nature.
Special guest out here.
But anyway, I digress. So go get your headphones. If you want to leave that cable with me, it's about to get rolled up in the wheel, though, and I'll see you in a minute. All right.
And by the way, before you finish that story, with Side Shot coming back in here, it's important to note that Side Shot has been an inspiration to both Keith and I, coming up with some of the stories, and he really has his finger on the pulse out there.
Oh, wait till you hear what he said about Lordstown. We'll get to that later.
Well, when we get into the Lordstown discussion, we'll have him give us his piece on that, his take on that. So.
Yeah. Okay. So back to Tesla. So we've talked. Jay brought this up most recently on one of our last podcasts, but Teslas really are kind of becoming an ideal tow behind vehicle for RVers. And one of the reasons, Jay, that you brought up was, well, hey, you've got 50 amp service in an RV park, in a lot of these parks, 30 amp at least if they have electricity. A lot of them have 50 amp. Dude, you could charge your Tesla while you're, plugged in overnight. But now we have news where, and this has been done before, but not at highway speeds, where people are flat towing Teslas at highway speeds, leaving them in gear. Okay, so that's kind of the key here. and they are recharging the batteries by doing so at highway speeds. Now, this test, when they performed it, and we got this from InsideEVs.com.
Yeah, so it's a guy. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, and I've watched the channel before. It's Warped Perception YouTube channel is basically what it is. A guy by the name of Rich, who's behind that channel. He tries a lot of crazy stuff, on his channel, and he wanted to try this, and he used his very own Tesla Model S, and he towed it behind. It was being towed behind his Mercedes-Benz E-Class. To prove this point that this works. He didn't know for sure, but you have to get up to a specific speed in order for it to get into that high charging mode. So go ahead from there, Keith. I'm stealing your thunder.
That's perfect. So what they found out is that if you tow this thing at highway speeds, you get fast charging equivalent. It's recharging at basically the same level that you would get at a fast charging station. Not a supercharger, a fast charger.
Right.
Okay?
Right. It's about half the rate of a supercharger is what you're getting out of it, so it's a fast charger. Much faster than you would. Obviously, and we'll get into some of the details here, you're a lot better off to tow the vehicle and do this than you get charged up at a much faster rate than you would going in and plugging it at a station. It might take you 3 hours to get where you need to be.
Yeah, so kind of this thing of if you're gonna, again, like Jay, like when I saw this, I said, somebody in the RV industry needs to jump on this because you have the potential here now. If the manufacturers like Tesla or Ford with their Mach-E or GM with any of their stuff, or really anybody that's making EVs, will basically approve this as official. You tend to sell a lot more units to RV owners that need to flat tow a vehicle because you would never have to plug that thing in theory, if you move around every 4 or 5 days, you just hook the car up and go, and it's charged by the time you get where you're going.
We've talked a lot about what Airstream is doing with their e-assist trailers that they're focusing on right now, which is the same principle as what we're talking about right now. So to think for 1 second that you can't still have the same amount of fun without the worry with an all-electric vehicle and an all-electric tow behind, you're out of your mind.
Yep.
I mean, just look at the technology. This has proven the point that you can do this and achieve it. And once you get to your destination, like Keith was saying, if you go to an RV park, you're already set up with 50 amp hookups, man. And so you're going to see the excuses that I hear from some people on some of these forums about we don't have the infrastructure to do Yeah, right. Yes, we do have the infrastructure, people.
Outside the box thinking, right? Like this is kind of that creative thinking that if we kind of known for that in this country, right? Especially during the great generation, the greatest generation. Like this is perfect. Like yes, go do this and boom. You don't even have to pay for a recharge. You just it's organic, as they say.
So some of the details on this, just to kind of give this to you, and they don't recommend that you try this until Tesla officially comes out and says, you can do it. But the results yielded no emergency messages, no issues, even with the vehicle that was towing it. And keep in mind, there is some of that resistance, so you have to have a high torque.
Yep.
You have to have some torque there. In fact, he was worried about maybe overheating the transmission when they were doing it, but they didn't. And then just remember, he was trying to prove a point about how much fuel that it would physically take to recharge it versus the amount of carbon fuel that it takes to make the electricity anyway. So he proved a couple of points here with that. And
keep in mind that
interesting. It was a good lesson. Put it that way.
And RVs, you're towing something anyway. So just keep in mind that that weight to an RV, if you're towing a vehicle, it's probably insignificant.
Right.
Yeah,
I think so. Absolutely. So he did this at 70 miles an hour. The key is 70 miles an hour in order for it to kick into that 65 kilowatt rate. And the battery was being replenished at the accelerated rate. He showed it plainly charging at that high rate. He towed the car for about 25 miles. He he got up to, I believe it was around 50 to 65%.
Yeah.
Of within 25 miles, and that's, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty cool. So you think about that if you're broke down on the road somewhere, and or you're out of power, you would think about calling someone to tow your vehicle, but heck, they could just basically hook you up and just pull you down the highway for about 20 minutes and get you charged and on your way. So there you go.
Yeah.
So, hey man, thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah, I love it.